Hello everyone! Today we are going to learn about David and Goliath. It's a really famous story. I'm sure many of you have heard it already. But it's about David. As you know, he ends up becoming the king of Israel. But David was just a young guy, and he goes out to bring food to his older brothers. Well, his older brothers were in the middle of fighting a battle with the Philistines. So he goes to bring food and he sees this huge giant named Goliath. And he's shouting all these insults at the God of Israel. So he's shouting all these insults at God. And David gets really mad. The Goliath, he starts, taunting people. And basically, the way it worked was the Philistines were saying, call out your greatest warrior and he will fight our greatest warrior, who was Goliath. According to the passage, he was 9 feet tall, so he was huge, like a giant. He was probably a really skilled fighter, and there was no one in Israel that was willing to fight him. Well, David steps up because he's so upset at the insults Goliath is, hurling at the Israelites. So he steps up and he says, I will fight him. Well, Goliath gets up and he's insulted because David, it just seems like a young guy. And David, he finds 5 smooth river rocks. So he finds these rocks, and the Goliath says, I will fight you, and he starts taunting him. Well, David puts the river rocks in a sling and he starts swinging the sling. He throws it and the rock hits Goliath right in the middle of the head, and it sinks into his head. Goliath falls back and he dies. In this story, it shows the bravery and the courage of David in the midst of this. And why did he have that courage? Because he believed that God was with him the whole time. Even though he's fighting this unbelievable giant, even though, he didn't have the experience that this fighter had, but he believed that God was with him regardless. So with that, he had faith and he came forth. One really interesting thing about the story is when you see those 5 river rocks that David picks up, that's actually an illustration of God's word, because there were 5 books in the Torah. David was able to defeat his enemies, was able to defeat Goliath through this. So I think this is a lesson for all of us, in that when we believe that God is with us, when we believe that we are not alone and that God is protecting us, that God is giving us strength, we could do amazing and great things for God. You see, the reason why David did this is not because he wanted to become famous. He does end up becoming famous. Not because he wanted to be the future king of Israel, though he does end up becoming the future king of Israel. But what he wanted to stand up for what was right, because Goliath was insulting God. If you ever are in those moments where you feel like you really have to stand up for what's right, know that you are not alone and that God is with you. That desire for you to do what's right, that comes from God, and that comes from a good place. We also have to make sure that it's coming out in a way that is safe and productive, and in a way that can really spark change. Here David, he takes his sling and he slings it at Goliath, and Goliath falls down. That's actually really a metaphor for what happens when we really take God's word seriously and we really use it to face and tackle our problems and the things that we're up against in this world. So I hope for all of us, we can have the same heart as David, that we can have that same courage, that same strength to really stand up for what's right, and to remember that God is with us always. Bye.